Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the United Stand. This is your latest Manchester United news and transfer news, and look, the mayhem of the last 24 hours, over that at the moment to be honest, does start to kick in as Dan James starts for Manchester United less than 24 hours ago against Wolverhampton Wanderers and leaves Manchester United 24 hours later. There's a lot I want to talk about. I want to talk about the actual state of the transfer window and whether we can get somebody else in desperately into that midfield in the last 24 hours, but also a little bit look about the outgoings. We know the ingoings have been fantastic, but for me, this is a bit like looking at the front and not the back. It's a distance-related error. You know, you look at something from behind, you think that looks good, and as you drive past, you go, no, it doesn't. And the reality is, I think that with Manchester United's transfer window, the incomings look fantastic, but the outgoings don't look as good. I also want to talk about Dan James himself. Has it been a failure? Does it go down as a failure? Lots to get into basically, but the latest with Dan James is that he's going to go to Leeds United for £20 million, which we'll talk about the fee as well. We'll talk about that in a moment or two. But it is interesting. It is interesting that United are doing business that many of us thought we should have done weeks ago. I mean, you know, as I said, Dan James has started 2 of our 3 games. I can understand, like, you know, I've messaged Ricky and he said, look, you know, surely not. And it's like, well, yeah, it is going to happen. And, you know, Ricky's a big fan of Dan James. Some people are. I've got no issue with that. But ultimately, I do sympathise with those people. Dan James and a cool 25 million for Calvin Phillips, please. I mean, we won't even be looking to do that, Blue Rover. It's a good idea, but we won't even be looking to do that. But this does strike me as a transfer window where we've not made up our mind. There's a lot of, I mean, I think Varane and Sancho, yeah, obvious, right? Ronaldo, we weren't even looking at Thursday morning and we saw him on Friday, forced into action with Ronaldo. And on the sales side of things, we've dithered. And the interesting thing is, before I just talk about Dan James, we've had a lot of people through the summer say, oh, you know, the changes at United are very clear. We've got a director of football. We've got a plan. I don't think we've got a plan. I think this is one of the worst transfer windows we've had in relation to removal of players, and we've always been bad at getting rid of Deadwood. But how confusing is it as fans to read what the intentions are of the club and the coaching network when you've got a player that starts 2 of your 3 games and then is sold? Now, I would not have started Dan James, and I don't think many fans would, but Ollie and his coaches decided to start Dan James against Leeds and start him away against Wolves. Both games we needed to win, both games we did win. So how can you start a player ahead of many other players twice and then sell him? It's like we're making decisions on the hop, and that doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence because we're watching a style of play that we find very confusing. We're seeing substitutions that we feel are confusing, and we're seeing team selections that are a little bit confusing. And then we're getting players like Dan James, who I believe should be sold, who has started 2 games of the 3 and now is being sold. So basically yesterday morning, Ollie thinks he's good enough to start. This morning he's looking to sell him. And those people who say, well, you know, he was putting him in the shop window, we're not Leicester City bankrupt. We're Manchester United trying to be in a title race. You don't say, Tony, have a rest on the bench. Donny, have a rest on the... Oh, you're always on the bench. Lingard, you sit on the bench, you know, because we're putting Dan James in the shop window. What if you lose, Ollie? Doesn't matter. We might get 20 million for him. That's just not going to be the approach that we've taken. I agree selling James is good for future team selections, but do you think it's a red flag that we are counting on the transfer market to make decisions our managers should be making anyway? Says David Beale. Well, there's no doubt that this Ronaldo signing has forced the sale of Dan James. I think that was the title of the show. Definitely is the case. And let's dissect this first of all. There is still hope that we will do more business. There is still talk of Lingard going, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let's talk about Dan James for a moment. 50 games for Manchester United, 6 goals and 7 assists. That's not great. A lot of those appearances, I imagine, would be substitutions as well, although he has started a lot of games. But ultimately, when I look at Dan James, I've got to take you back to the very start. I remember when we bought Dan James, and it was a bit of a divider at the time. And you can go back to my reaction when we bought Dan James, and I pretty much remember it. I haven't been back and watched it myself, and I might do later on. But I pretty much remember what I said about Dan James. It's an interesting one. You know, it's not obvious. You know, Man City aren't looking to buy him. Liverpool aren't looking to buy him. He's obviously been recommended to us. Some said it was Ryan Giggs. But for £15 million, it's loose change for Manchester United. And I quite liked the signing because I was like, it'd be nice to bring a player from the Championship who comes into the United team and does really well. But if it doesn't work out, it's 15 million quid. And I think in the case of Dan James, It hasn't quite worked out. He's not quite been good enough for a top 4 side. But for 15 million, 2 years later, rather 2 years later than 5 years later, I think it's very obvious that last season was a big year for him and he didn't really grab it. His first year started off quite well and then dipped and came back a little bit. And ultimately, I think after 2 years, we can pretty much, back the club and Ollie in saying that, yes, it's right to sell Dan James. The experiment has been tried, it didn't work, and we sell him and we'll get 20 million for him, which I think is about right. I mean, I don't know what people think about that. We'll talk about the price in a moment. Ollie on Britain's biggest hoarders next year. We need to get rid of the riffraff, Jones, Pereira, Lingard, James, etc., says Edward Woodward. So look, I've got no problem with the signing Dan James. For £15 million, if it had worked, it would have been one of the bargains of the decade. So it's not worked out, and we'll get our money back. So it's not a complete flop, but it's not been the gamble or low risk gamble it was. So I'm not bothered about what's happened with Dan James. I don't see it as a terrible signing. I mean, look, it does have to go down as a flop because it's not worked. But as I've said to you before about transfers, if 60% of your transfers work out well, you've done okay. And statistically, you can look back over 40, 50 years and that's the case. Even Sir Alex Ferguson, Klopp, everybody, they won't have anywhere near 100% success rate on transfers because it doesn't work like that. So yeah, look, at the end of the day, Dan James hasn't been a good signing, but it's not been a terrible signing. And for the price, we get our money back and we remove somebody from the squad that should be removed from the squad. And he should be removed from the squad because he's limited. I always used to say this to Ricky, he's a limited player. I don't care whether he can work in a system or not, he's limited. At Manchester United, and I think Adam said it as well, I want players at Manchester United who are better than everybody else and can compete with the best teams in Europe. And Dan James is really a player that I could get from Brighton, I could get him from Norwich. I don't think he's any better than Brighton or Norwich wingers. And ultimately, that has been proven over 2 years. So we let him go. What I don't want to hear is people saying if he goes to Leeds under Bielsa and he does really well, we've got it wrong. That is not the case because we've said time and time again, that's, football's not that simple. A player that fails at United and goes elsewhere and does well doesn't mean that we failed. It means in this case that they weren't quite good enough to be a top 4 player. I can name you loads of players from Premier League clubs that aren't good enough to play for United or Chelsea or Liverpool or Man City, but they're still good Premier League players. And I think that's Dan James. Dan James has probably gone too high. You know what? He's like Tom Daly, a Poundland Tom Daly. He looks a bit like Tom Daly as well, doesn't he? A diver, right? He's gone too high. He's gone a lot. I can't jump from here. It's too high. He's got to go down a level, and he's got to try Leeds now. And at Leeds might be his level. And Leeds are a team that's going to be around mid-table Premier League. So maybe Dan James isn't even that level. Maybe he's going to go to Leeds, not work out, and he'll have to drop down to Norwich or something like that, or back to the Championship. But I certainly think Leeds is worth a go for him. But I would say to anybody who says if he goes to Leeds under Bielsa, that proves Ollie's a bad manager. We will get that. And, imagine he plays for Leeds after the international break and he scores 2 goals. And everyone goes, oh, this is Ollie the PE teacher. I will stick by Ollie here because ultimately the problem with Dan James is not that Ollie hasn't coached him properly. I think Ollie's given him a lot of chances. You can't be a hypocrite. Of course he's going to work better at Leeds or Everton than he's going to work at Manchester United. We play against teams that are scared of us and play a low block. Now, I don't know why they're scared of us. The football we play isn't great at the moment, but they do play low blocks. We see it all the time. Dan James needs space to run into. He's like a little fast dog that wants to run around a field. And all you're doing is letting him out in the back garden. He's one of them dogs that just wants to run and run and run after a rabbit, right? And we've only got a little back garden because that's the space we're allowed to play in. And Dan James needs to run free. At Leeds, we always look forward to playing Leeds because it's wide open. We've played terrible against Southampton, terrible against Wolves. And against Leeds, it was one of the best games we've seen in a long time because Leeds opened the game up. Well, this is going to suit Dan James fantastically. Wide open spaces, run around, he will hurt teams. If Dan James is in a foot race against somebody in space, he is capable of getting there first because of his speed, and he is capable of putting a good cross in, and he is capable of having a shot. He's not very accurate with his shooting, he's not very accurate with his crossing, but he's not terrible at it. So I think Dan James will suit a team that's not ambitious as Manchester United are and doesn't have to play as many low blocks as Manchester United does. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Dan James does do well, but I think you show off your football knowledge, inexperience if you start saying, "Oh, Bielsa's got the best out of him and Ollie couldn't." It's very much about Dan James is a limited player. He wants to kick and run and have a shot or put a cross in, and we don't have that sort of space. Mata suits us better, even though I think Mata's done at this level. Mata suits us better because he works better against the low block. But of course, he hasn't got the legs. Mark, any truth to Kevin Phillips to United? Peter Harding associated the BBC on Twitter stating United are in talks. Mate, I would love that to happen. I would love it to happen. He would be absolutely perfect for us, but I just cannot see it happening in 24 hours. Calvin Phillips would be very welcome at Manchester United. I'm not a massive fan of him, really, but he's way better than everything else we've got. I'm hearing Ollie is willing to let Donny van de Beek go on loan, but only if Saul or Camavinga come in, which is highly unlikely. Jesse has offers, players' decision, says Sean Turner. We'll talk about that. But yes, Dan James is heading on his way for £20 million. And obviously, Dan, look, the good side of Cristiano Ronaldo coming is it's forced us to start doing deals that we should have done. And for anybody who thinks that we should keep Dan James, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Mason Greenwood, Anthony Martial, Edison Cavani, Cristiano Ronaldo. We've still got Juan Mata. We've still got Pogba who can play in the attack. We've still got Bruno. Van der Beek's still here. That's 10 players. Lingard's still here. That's 11. And Dan James, 12. I mean, whether you like the player or not, we've got to ship somebody out. And it might not be the player that you want to go, but we do need to ship him out. And I think the positivity about Dan James is that somebody will pay money for him. And anybody who says that Dan James is atrocious, that shows you he's not atrocious. Nobody would give us a pen, even 10p for Pereira. Nobody will give us 10p for Phil Jones, but somebody's willing to give us 20 million on Dan James. And I actually had a bit of an argument this afternoon. I just want to know what the live chat thinks. Please smash a like on the video if you're watching, by the way. To everyone who's saying swap Dan James for Phillips, Peter Harding is saying Leeds aren't interested unless it's a player plus 40 million, says Joshua Bowater. So, yeah, we're not going to do that. And welcome to the Members Club, Mitch Park. Sad that it hasn't worked out and wishing he will succeed at Leeds like how Sahar did at Palace, wishing him all the best. And that's the bottom line, Anand. I think Dan James is a really nice lad. We'll talk about that in a moment, actually, because it's a very important thing. But in relation to his price, what was your thought on the price? Because funnily enough, Fabrizio's come out probably an hour after I said it, saying that 20 million is the price. I'd tweeted it asking people what they thought, and I said, as far as I was concerned, we paid 15 million for him. He's played 50 games for Manchester United in 2 years, and he's a Welsh international. I'd say 20 million minimum is what we should be looking at. Some people said, oh, you'll be lucky to get your money back. I think 20 million, considering it's a COVID market, is a good deal for Manchester United. 20 to 25 million says Riley Stevens, 25 million says Kyle Marr, 20 million says Anthony Wisdom. Yeah, I mean, look, if we get 25 million, brilliant. But as Astrofly says, 20 million is about right. I'm happy with 20 million for Dan James. We get our money back, we clear somebody out, and we actually get some bloody money in. We're not low. I would have been really frustrated if we'd loaned him out. So I'm very happy with the deal. It's the right deal. He goes to a club where we can keep an eye on him and wish him all the best as well. And let's hope this 20 million goes towards removing Fred, says Ben Anderson. And James isn't a flop, but it's ultimately down to the standards at United that is required of a player, and he hasn't lived up to it, says Tyrese. I agree with that. Technically, I think he is a player that's not worked out. When you're looking at Ollie's transfer record, you know, we did it with Mourinho, we did it with Van Gaal, Schneidlin goes down on Van Gaal as a failure, and there was a few that went down as a failure for Jose, of course. But no, look, you know, you're not going to get them all right, and I think it's one of those deals where ultimately it never, you know, unless it's Fellaini, it never makes you smile when a player goes. But you know, we get our money back, he gets a good move. It's about as good as it gets, really, in relation to a transfer. We need to get players out. That's not always a nice thing. But we get the money back, he gets a good move. Obviously, you shouldn't be celebrating it because it's a player leaving, but it, you know, it fits. It does fit tick all the boxes. And what I do want to say about Dan James as well is it's been abundantly clear. I mean, remember his first goal at Old Trafford? I think it was to make it 1-1. I can't remember who it was against. Somebody in the chat will know. We made it 1-1 with a few minutes to go, and he went to the Stretford end celebrating, and Rashford and Martial tore him. You know, basically, you know, ripped his head off, basically. And I think that's the thing about Dan James for me. He's clearly been living the dream at Manchester United because, you know, when you score your first goal and then you run to the crowd, but it's only 1-1 and you're at United and you need to go and win. And that's why Rashford and Martial are saying, get back to the halfway line. But for him, it was a dream move. And remember, he did lose his dad just before he signed for us. So it was a dream to go from Swansea to Manchester United. And he clearly comes across as a nice lad. But ultimately, I do wish him all the best. Just not good enough. And that's the second part for me, which is really important, where we do get lost. I see people on social media every day going on about, oh, this is my favourite player. I don't care what the haters say. He's my favourite player. He gives his all. And I'm like, well, that's fine. But you are personalising a player, which I think is always a bad idea. I know footballers that have been legends for United that are arseholes in real life, and I know footballers that haven't been good for United who are really nice. I also know legends that are really nice and players that have not been very good who aren't very nice. So, I don't ever agree with personalising footballers, because if they have a bad performance, you've got to critique them. It's great if you like a footballer and they're really, really good. It's the perfect thing. But, Dan James, to me, probably a really nice lad, not quite good enough for Manchester United. And that's the lesson we should all learn, really. As Manchester United fans, we want to be the best. We want to win league titles. You can't personalise it and go, well, he's a nice lad and he runs around a lot and he puts his effort in, so I like him. For me, I'll always judge a player on their football performance, and ultimately Dan James has come up short as a Manchester United player. But I wish him all the best, and on a personal level, I'm sure he is a nice lad, but we need the best at Manchester United, and that's why for me, I don't personalise players very often, because to me, I want to judge them on what they do in a football shirt. And, as I'd say, Jesse Lingard's clearly a nice lad. He's had his problems, but I would be selling him tomorrow as well if I could, because ultimately I want what's best for United, and he's a bit of money. It ain't 20 million, it's 12 million plus add-ons, says Sean Turner. Well, add-ons are in everything, aren't we? We're doing add-ons. Ronaldo will expose Ollie if the midfield and our style of play is pedestrian. Ollie and the coaching staff jobs at risk, says Prince. And welcome to the Members Club, Warlord. Thanks everyone who just become a member, by the way, and smash a like on the video. Of course, the interesting development, if you're tuning in then, Dan James is going to go to Leeds. There's a bit of a queue for Dan James as well. There is a bit of a queue for Dan James, but this takes, John just says, any chance of signing a CDM, Mark? This is where it gets very interesting for me with Dan James, because we've just brought 20 million in, or 12 million plus add. We've brought money in, and we've cleared a wage, right? If we get rid of Lingard as well, we bring money in and we clear a wage. Basically, if Dan James and Lingard go, you're going to have about 30 million and about 170,000 in wages cleared. That's a midfielder. 30 million and 170,000 is a midfielder. Now, we've got to try and get rid of Lingard, which hopefully we can do one way or another. I hope it's not going to be a loan. That would be a real failure. But, we don't seem to be doing anything with the midfield, and that's the problem at the moment. And it fits in with what I was saying before. And also, remember, you don't necessarily have to move Dan James' fee with Lingard's fee to get a midfielder, because remember what I said at the weekend, and it was very, very obvious. After Ronaldo, United was still thinking about Dalot going and going after Trippier. Well, Dalot we wouldn't have got any money for, because it would have been a loan deal. And yet we've got money to buy Trippier. So there is money. I reckon there's about 15, 20 million anyway. And then you're going to get what you get from Dan James, takes you to 35 million. And, then maybe a bit for Lingard. So I think there is a bit of money for Manchester United. I saw something this morning that Solskjaer wants a midfielder but has accepted he's going to have to wait a year. But that's a contradiction. That is a contradiction, because Ronaldo's for now and wants to win things now. If Ronaldo's only here for 2 years, are we basically saying that 50% of the time Ronaldo's here, we're not going to have the team that we need because we need a midfielder? And then next summer, Pogba might go, and Cavani's gone, and Van der Beek might be gone, and Matic might be gone. And, we'll get one midfielder now, but the next... Ronaldo could find his time at United never quite being ready. And that, to me, and to many fans, is why the failure to get a midfielder this summer is very disappointing, because it's the final piece. It's the final piece. But ultimately as well, a lot of fans are saying, I'm not waiting for the final piece. It's not an excuse. Ronaldo's here now. There's enough good players there now. You're going to have to go and achieve this year. And if you don't, well, you're going to get criticised. So I don't think there is an excuse. You've got to go and succeed. And with 24 hours or just over 24 hours left, I think we do need to go and get a midfielder. And there has always been people available in that midfield for about 30, 40 million pounds. Forget Basuma, forget Neves. We're not going to have time to do that sort of a thing. Unless we're going to pull something... I've got to say, I don't think we're going to do anything, which is a real shame. But we do need to do something, and I'm just hoping against hope that we do in the midfield. Sell Martial, looks slow and unimpressive, says right. Well, you're not going to sell Martial in 24 hours, are you? Just go and get Sol on loan with obligation to sign next year. Sorts our midfield problem, doesn't cost anything till next year, says Sean Turner. I don't think we need the obligation to buy either, Sean. I'll always have a soft spot for James. As for me, he represents the drawing of a new era under Ollie as one of his first signings. Wish him all the best, says Matt Carter. I agree with you on that one. Can we sell Fred and Lingard plus 30 to 35 million for Declan Rice, says Tatsiar. No, not in 24 hours, mate, we can't. But look, that's something that I did want to touch on as well in relation to Dan James, and I mentioned it at the start of the video, and buying a midfielder as well. I don't think, I hate saying this, I really do, because I want this season to be really important, and 7 points from 9's not terrible. And I look at the players like Ronaldo and Bruno and Pogba and Varane and Maguire, and De Gea's back playing brilliantly, and Sancho, and I think Wan-Bissaka's going to get better. And we are that donut, we are that bagel, we are that polo mint. There is so much to enjoy around the edge, but in the middle it's a hole. There's a hole there. And I just look at this summer, and I think, the things that I noticed and the things I was being told from the training ground is that we're going to play a more attacking football. We're going to play with one holding midfielder, a number 8 and a number 10. Bruno 10, maybe Pogba 8 and a number 6. Sort of, working with the number 8, but the 8's got more licence to go forward. And I watched this play yesterday, and we played with 2 6s. Pogba, too deep. Fred not knowing what he's doing. And I'm like, that's like last season. And I think, in the pre-season, I did see Matic playing as a 6 and Donny supporting him as an 8 against Everton, and it worked really well. I saw a very fit Matic in the pre-season, and I thought, you know what? For the first 3 games of the season, we could actually play Matic and Van der Beek. They play well together. Matic can play a game a week, and Donny looks really good. We come into the season, it's McTominay and Fred, it's Pogba and Fred, it's Matic and Fred, and you're like, what have we actually done over the summer? Did everyone just go on holiday and say more of the same? I don't see any tactical advancement over the summer, which has been very disappointing. But in relation to transfers, Dan James, as I said, sold, good deal, good money, right deal for him, right deal for us, but he starts 2 of our first 3 games. This, to me, feels like this has happened in the last 24 hours. This doesn't feel to me like Ollie came back. Well, look, what I'm trying to say in a short form is that when you work at a club like Chelsea or Manchester City or Liverpool, you sit in January sometimes, but maybe February, March, April, and you talk about your summer transfer business. And you say, I like these players. If you can't get them, these are the second choices. And these are the players we're looking to move out. And that's a conversation that any competent football club has. We're led to believe that Manchester United had these conversations. And yet, and look, the incomings of Sancho and Varane are good. Where's the midfielder? And as we know, Ronaldo was a very much quick, wasn't expected deal. But on the outgoings, welcome to the Members Club, Tatsia. On the outgoings, where is the preparation and where is the planning? Has there even been a meeting? Because it doesn't... I just think... It's almost like the meeting on transfers back in April about incomings and outgoings was scheduled for a full day meeting, right? And in the morning, they spoke about having, the incomings. Sancho, Varane, very good. Afternoon, we're going to talk about outgoings. And then suddenly, Ed Woodward had to go on holiday. And, Ollie had to go and do the shopping. And they're like, oh, we'll just wing it. Because it doesn't feel like we've prepared for the outgoings at all. Very obvious that Lingard should have been sold. He's still here. Very obvious that Pereira was going to be a problem to get rid of. He's gone on loan again. Very obvious that we've got 2 goalkeepers and we only need 1. They're both still here. Very obvious that someone like Dan James you need to make a decision on. Well, we start him for 2 of the first 3 games and then we're now selling him. It just feels like we've not been prepared around the squad and removal of players. And I'd wager a bet that Dan James was very much part of Ollie's plans until probably last night. And that's why he's been starting games. So I am a little bit confused about how we've done some fantastic business, epic business in the name of Cristiano Ronaldo, but on removing players, what the word I would use? Indecision. There seems to be a real indecision. Look, take Jesse Lingard for example. I've read 2 or 3 things today about Lingard. 1, that he could still go. 2, that he's not going to go, and 3, that he does want to go, but Ollie wants to keep him. And I'm like, is this another example of indecision around and clarity around what the actual vision at the football club is? We have no vision, clear vision as fans as to what our style of football is yet after 2 or 3 years. And I want to keep Jesse, but when is he going to play Ollie? When are you going to pick him? Do you realise how many attackers you've got? But I like him, I want to keep him, but that's not good enough at a high level. It's like, what this is like? I sent you a super chat, says Ronnie, on Sunday, telling you that this start for James was his last before leaving. Thank you and goodbye. No, Ronnie, I disagree with you on that. No, you're right that it's his last start, but you don't start a player as a thank you. in a Premier League game that you need to win. What if we'd lost? That I can't, Ronnie. I cannot get involved with that. I cannot deal with that. You're telling me that a Manchester United manager started Dan James to say thank you, goodbye. We could have been 2-0 down at half time. You know, you can lose your job off of a decision like that. I think he picked Dan James yesterday because he wanted Dan James to do a job on Adama Traore. That's why he picked him, as far as I'm concerned. But look at our starting 11 and imagine a CDM. It's hard to think of a trophy we shouldn't win. An excusable mistake in the window, says Connor Edson. The CDM is a massive part of what Manchester United need to do. But you know what I feel around the outgoings at United, and I don't know who's responsible for it. It's difficult. Welcome to the Members Club, Jack Lynch. It's difficult or easy to say it's on Ollie and stuff, but I feel like what's going on at United is Dan James' agent is the same as Camavinga, says Lil. A lot of people have the same agent though, don't they? Yeah, what this feels like to me is if you say you're running a factory, right? And your bank manager says you've got to sack people. You've got a staff, you've got 20 staff, right? You're not making much money. You've got to sack 5 people by the end of business, right? And you sit there as the manager and you go, Karaki, get them all to come in one by one, and we'll just look at their records and get rid of the ones we don't want. And they all come in one by one, and Karaki goes, why aye, man? Who are you getting rid of, Ollie? And he goes, I can't do it, Karaki, because they're all such good lads. I can't do it. I'm keeping them all, but we're going to go bankrupt. But I can't get rid of them because I like them all. And look, obviously, we're talking about Ollie there. This could be Ed Woodward. This could be Matt Judge. This could be the Glazers themselves. I'm just using Ollie because he's the manager as an example. But it does come across, and actually, can I just say, I'm not actually going to put the blame on Ollie for this because I don't think it's on Ollie. This has been happening under Mourinho. It's been happening under Van Gaal as well. I'm just using it as an example as a manager. Let's pretend that that's the actual club ethos. We seem to keep lots of people at our football club because they're nice to have around and we don't know what to do. But how can a football fan know in a 60-game season, actually, there isn't massive about you're not going to be able to use 9 forwards in 3 positions over a 60-game season. You're just not going to do it. We've already seen that Bruno Fernandes plays in FA Cup games. We've already seen that Paul Pogba plays in FA Cup games, and Rashford and Ronaldo will as well, and Harry Maguire does, and Luke Shaw does. Tellez is the prime example of the problem we have. We've only got 2 left backs, and Tellez barely kicked a ball last year. You're telling me that if we kept Dan James and we keep Jesse and Mata and all these players, they're gonna kick a ball much for a United team? There's too many players. But it seems we've been indecisive about what we want to do. If Ahmad would have gone on loan, no way James would be leaving. We have to strategy when it comes to outgoings. It's just a mess, says Sean Turner. I still think Dan James would have gone, Sean, even if Ahmad wasn't injured, because Manchester United ultimately do need to bring some money in. What's that? Sorry, I've just had a message from someone here. DM opens up opportunity for Donny and Lingard to get some more game time. It's such a key signing. It needs to happen. Ahmad injury influenced Dan James sale. No, I don't think the Ahmad injury has influenced it at all, Jack, because to be fair, Ahmad will be out for probably going on loan in January and will miss he probably won't be back fit really till the end of October. So I don't think that's about that. I mean, for me, I always say that the financial side of Manchester United is not actually that good, even though we are run like a bank, because they've got money. They have got money that they could easily have brought in. And I don't know. I don't know how we look at that, but we need to bring more money into the club. Somebody just said, I thought I was going to get an update on when Ronaldo's unveiling is going to be. I don't know. I don't know about that one. I wish I did, but I don't know when that's going to be, because actually, he's not going to be in the country until late next week. So how you do a video with Cristiano Ronaldo when he's not even going to be in the country is a difficult one, really. But we'll see. We'll see how that works out. James leaving frees up 21 for Cavani, his Uruguay number, and 7 for you-know-who. I still want a DM, though. Yesterday's performance has exposed our midfield issues, says Ami. Look, we've got an 8 o'clock show tonight where we've got Levin and Adam and Kev is going to be on. I've seen a lot of people today, and I've got no problem with this. I'll ask you this question, right? Did you yesterday at any point think, oh, I wish McTominay was fit? Because, I did. I thought Fred was that bad. I was like, I wish McTominay was fit. But he ain't the answer. We've got to stop doing this. We've got to stop lurching from one player to the other that we ultimately know isn't good enough. Scott McTominay, for me, gives everything for the shirt. I get why people like that. But he's not a number 6. We need to stop sort of letting the club off the hook in a sense by going, get Fred out, get McTominay in. Oh, he's shit. Give Matic a game. Oh, he's too old. Go back to Fred. Right, no, he's rubbish. Let's go to McTominay. We've actually done this for the last year. The fact that McTominay's the one who's injured at the moment, that could have been McTominay playing and Fred injured, and we'd be like, oh, we need Fred back for his mobility. We need a number 6, and we need it now. And the stupid thing is, you'll get a better Scott McTominay if you've got a better 6. You get a better Fred if you've got a proper 6. I mean, Fred isn't a 6. I mean, if anybody actually knows, Fred is more of a number 8. I mean, he can't shoot and his passing's not great, but he's actually more of a number 8. That's more or less what he was doing for Brazil in the Copa America. He's not a 6. And, people do get lost in this whole, you can't just have one holding midfielder and everyone else attack. But an 8 knows they've got to get back, but they know they can get forward. The problem we've got at the moment is we're playing with 2 6s who can't go forward because neither of them can do the job. Pogba has to stay back to protect Fred, and Pogba can't be left on his own because he can't do it either. That's why McTominay and McFred last year, they were basically 2 6s, but neither of them can do the job. I think if we had a Declan Rice, or an Ndidi, or a Calvin Phillips, or a Bissouma, and then you played McTominay next to them, you'd see a much better McTominay as an 8 because he can drive forward, which is his best assets. I think you'd see a better Fred as an 8 because he can run around a lot and be involved in everything. Pogba would be much better as an 8, and Donny as an 8 would work as well. But we haven't got the 6. We haven't got the 6. So these people who start going, oh, we missed McTominay yesterday. Well, how did we miss McTominay? We missed Pogba yesterday because he's having to play in a role that's not his. We need a number 6, and we do not have one. So all these people going, oh, we missed McTominay yesterday. Where are you going to play him? He'd have the same problem. He'd have put in the same performance as Pogba yesterday. Undervalued, underappreciated, and a victim of the system that doesn't suit him. We need a 6. 100%, and we don't have one. McTominay's still a better CDM than Fred. He's big, strong, and decent at tackling. He's the solution, though, but miles better than Fred. I disagree with Ross. I've never been impressed with McTominay as a number 6 because he's not very mobile, and I don't think his passing range is much better either. But I think he's a good 8. I don't think he's a very good 6. Hi, Mark. How's your day been? Just tuned in, but I was actually wondering today why United keep and loan all this Deadwood thought, says Callum. We seem to struggle to break down lesser teams in low blocks. Until we can. It really is the difference between us and other top teams, CDM, says Ryan. Mark, Ollie won't probably sell James. It's the people above him. What do you think, says Joe. I'm not being harsh here, but I can't name 5 worse midfielders in the Prem than Fred. He can't do anything well. I can't see what Ollie and the coach are seeing him, says Sean Turner. Fred is a good continental player. He'd be great in Italy, but the Premier League pace is too much for him. Give him time on the ball and he looks deceptively good, says Sam Brox. My nan would play better than Fred if we were not buying anyone. Ollie rather play Lindelof. Can Lindelof be any worse in that position, says Gabe. Hi Mark, I remember Barca playing Deco, Xavi and Iniesta in the midfield. Why can't we play Bruno, Pogba and Donny, says Jiro. Well, the coaching's not good enough, mate. You can play Pogba, Bruno and Donny in the midfield, and I'm sure Pep could find a way of doing it, but you've got to be a bloody good coach to do it. Because it to the mind's eye, it doesn't work. Donny, Bruno and Pogba doesn't work in the midfield. You've just got to be a bloody good coach to make it work. And we haven't got that level of coaching in our midfield. I put a tweet up this morning of me in my back garden. And basically what it is, you can check it out on Mark Goldbridge, but what I did is with the ball, I've got one of them sort of trampoline things for footballs where you can kick the ball against it and control it. And I basically said Liverpool, Chelsea and Man City's tempo versus Manchester United's tempo. And what I did is I kicked the ball against the trampoline thing and 5 in a row, first touch, bang, 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 bang. Then I stopped and P-rolled it up to the ball, started doing little pivots and passed it, touch, pivot, pass. That's United's tempo in a video, because I see Liverpool, Man City and Chelsea moving the ball very quickly all around the pitch, whether on the attack or in the midfield or at the back. It's not just the midfield. You know, we're very slow at moving the ball around the back and in the attack. This is Manchester United's problem. Tempo is such an easy word to say, but, it means a hell of a lot in relation to United. The amount of touches we take on the ball and how slow we are on the ball demonstrates to me a real lack of clarity in the coaching at the moment, because Liverpool players know where everybody is. They can almost hit a ball without looking because they'll know where somebody's going to be. They're that well coached. The reason Pogba and Fred and Shaw and Maguire and Varane take so long passing it amongst themselves is because they don't really know where Bruno's meant to be. And they don't really know where, the runner of the striker's going to be. And they don't really know where Sancho's going to be or where Greenwood's going to be. Nobody's in tune. There's no chemistry. And that's why the tempo's so slow. There's no confidence in the team. Confidence, you'll hit it first time. You heard that the Newcastle game will not be televised at all, which is annoying because people who can't go live won't be able to see Ronnie's return. Well, it's a 3 o'clock kickoff, Raz. This is what it's all about in this country. Regardless who our DM is, 2 opposition players can easily pass around him. We need all our midfielders to track back when we lose the ball, says Andre. Even Pep can't do a Donny, Pogba and Bruno midfield. He tried it in the Champions League final. No DM. It failed, says ORJ. And thank God James is going. Should take Fred and Martial in his bag, says Desiree. He's not messing his words about that. So, yeah, Dan James heading off to Leeds. £20 million into the Glazers' pocket. I mean, look, net spend-wise, that probably covers a lot of Ronaldo. But there's money to go and get a midfielder if they want to. Sam Brock says, the lack of tempo on the ball is just because we've got shite players. There was a good article on Sky Sports about scanning, says Sam Brocks. And do you think it is possible to sweeten the deal with Leeds by adding Fred to the deal for free? Think I'm calling Ole Gunnar, says Ronnie. The thing is about Fred, let's just talk about Fred for a moment. There is absolutely no evidence, and in fact, categorically, I'll tell you right now, Ole likes Fred. I mean, that first 5 minutes against Wolves, I think there are managers out there that would have subbed him off. He played 90 minutes. And we saw that a lot last season, whether it was McTominay or Fred. They'd have a bad game and you'd think, how have they played 90 minutes? And he still sticks with them. So these players are the sort of players that Ollie values. He values people like Dan James and Scott McTominay and Fred. These players that will run around forever for him. Even like Fred cost us a goal against Southampton last week and he nearly cost us the result yesterday. But yes, he still starts games for Ollie. So these people who think we're going to sell Fred, he's nowhere near the chopping block. Donny van der Beek's on the chopping block. Maybe Martial's moving towards that. But Fred's nowhere near that. So we spent a lot of money on Fred. Ollie didn't actually buy Fred either. It was a Mourinho signing. But he's certainly not a player that United are looking to sell. I think the sad thing is, not that we're not looking to sell Fred. I think the problem we've got is that we're very limited in that midfield. Our options are too small. You've got Fred, McTominay, really. Matic can't play every week. He's too old. Pogba you can't play in the midfield. We've seen that. You can't play Pogba in the midfield without a proper number 6. But then you look in the attack and it's like, it goes back to why are we keeping Lingard? Why are we keeping, Dan James is going to go. We've got so many options in the attack and then in the midfield we're so short of options. And yet the midfield is the most important playing area in the pitch. Sad to see James going, but it's best for his career right now. Wouldn't mind having a buyback clause in the contract, says Brian. I don't want a buyback clause. I think it'd be a waste of time, Brian. I don't think we need a buyback clause for Dan James. He's had 2 years here. He's not quite the level of that. Hopefully he can be the my prediction with Dan James, he'll go to Leeds and be okay. And in about 2 or 3 years, he'll probably drop down to Norwich or something like that. I don't think he's even at Leeds. He will be he's not going to be like Rafinha or something like that. So I don't see a buyback clause for him. I hope it works out really well at Leeds for him, but he's a limited player. He is what he is. He's fast. He can put a cross in. He can get a shot off, but intricacy, he's not really got that going. But I think he might do quite well at Leeds because there's a lot of space. To be fair, the outgoing since Ollie's taken charge has been good with Sanchez, Lukaku, Young and Darmian, but we should have done more, says Jack Lynch. And question for you, Mark, would you take Basuma if it meant not getting Ronaldo? No, I don't think so, Jake. well, no, of course I wouldn't. I'm just trying to think about what you were talking about there. I was focusing more on Basuma and what the player you said. I mean, no, Cristiano Ronaldo is just, it's a once in a lifetime fairy tale. So I wouldn't not take Ronaldo at Manchester United, but I shouldn't have to make that choice anyway. I shouldn't have to make a hypothetical, Ronaldo or a midfielder choice anyway, because logically you could say, well, Ronaldo is a striker, we've got Cavani, we've got Martial, we've got Greenwood, and a midfielder would make us a better team. I can understand that argument. Ronaldo makes us a very different, exciting team, but we've still got a problem in the midfield, whereas Basuma could solve the midfield and make us a more balanced team. I get that, but ultimately we shouldn't have to be making these hypothetical choices because what we've got is fantastic. The reason why Ollie won't drop McFred is the same as the bromance he has with the Glazers. They saved him his job when he was in a really dark place, says Z is boss. I'm very surprised, just on Basuma for a moment. I'm very, very surprised that Basuma he's actually staying at Brighton. I really thought he would be coming to Manchester United. Now, apparently The Athletic have said that Cristiano Ronaldo's return to Manchester United will be official in the coming hours. There we go. And I don't know how they're going to do this then, Manchester United. Is it just... Maybe we're not going to get the big announcement video then, which is a bit of a shame. But there you go. And Sky are saying that Manchester United are happy for Jesse Lingard to stay and fight for his place at the club this season, which is a shame. That is a shame. But that's the, at the end of the day, I think that's going to be a big mistake that's not going to work out well for club or player. Manchester United happy for Jesse Lingard to stay at the club. Lingard's priority this summer has been to remain at Old Trafford. West Ham are one of the clubs who would have been interested in signing him. So basically, Jesse doesn't want to go. He wants to stay and fight for his place. And United have said, we're happy for you to do that, which I think is a mistake because I think that the club should be saying, again, it goes back to what I was saying before. We're not strong enough. We've not been strong enough this summer in making tough decisions. We should have made a tough decision around the goalkeepers. One of them should have been got rid of. There would have been buyers certainly for Dean Henderson. That decision should have been made. This Dan James thing should have happened sooner. And Lingard, for me, should have been told, you're not going to get any game time and you've only got a year left on your deal. We want to sell you. But clearly we've gone, you're absolutely fine to say. So we're going to have to give him a new contract. We've got to give Lingard a new contract now. That's the thing as well. We're not just keeping a player. We're now going to give him a new contract. And I just think we've made a big mistake there. And I think that the sad thing about Lingard is that I think his career would have been far better off playing first team football at West Ham. I mean, I don't know how a player makes that decision. Personally, I understand why they make it. But professionally, you're playing every single game for West Ham and you're one of their best players and you win Premier League Player of the Month. But at United, you think you're going to get game time ahead of Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford, Paul Pogba, Bruno Fernandes. You've got no chance. You're not going to play hardly any game time. And you're certainly not going to start games ahead of those because you already know that how Ollie treats players that, are part of the furniture. He's not going to pick you ahead of Bruno. He's not going to pick you ahead of Rashford. He's not going to pick you ahead of Greenwood or Sancho. So it's a really odd decision professionally from Jesse. And look, I hope he can prove us all wrong, but I can't see it. And ultimately it means United are going to have to give him a new contract. And ultimately it means we miss out on another 20 million that we could have put together with what we're getting for Dan James and bought a midfielder. So I think Lingard staying means forget a midfielder, unfortunately, which is a shame. But I don't blame Jesse for that. I blame the club. The club should be making tough decisions. Look at what Pep Guardiola did with Sergio Aguero. He hasn't got a striker now. He hasn't replaced him, but he still said go. So, yeah, I think it's the wrong choice, but what can you do? Do you think Man United would sell it? And ultimately, as I said, it's not just about United. I think for Jesse, if he wants to play for England, I know he's in the England squad now, but how can you keep getting an England squad when you're not playing for United? Do you think Man United would sell Anthony Martial to an English team? I'd love him at Arsenal, although that would never happen, says Carl. I'd be interested to see what happens with Martial. Hi Mark, I feel like United will make a last minute signing like Sanderberg or Saul on loan. Can you explain their play styles, their similarities and differences, says Sihan. Well, I'm not going to bother wasting my time talking about players that I hope we get, that we aren't going to get. If we buy them, I'll talk to you about them, but it somewhat irritates me that we haven't got a holding midfielder, so I don't really want to talk about ones that probably aren't going to happen. Brian Gallagher says United can't sell Fred for the simple reason that there is no one else to play there. I agree he's not good enough, but I don't think there's anything that Ollie can do right now with his options. This is Brian Gallagher. Could James be in for Leeds? Could this open up the door for Phillips, Mark? No, Grant, because they'll want very good money for Phillips. And why aren't United looking at Palina or Sakaria for DM? Would cost no more than 25 million for either, and would give Pogba a lot of freedom, says Shane Farris. I don't know. I think in relation to those sort of signings, United probably haven't made those signings because they don't trust those sort of signings, and they'd rather stick with what they've got. But they're the sort of signings that Leicester do. Leicester will buy a Fofana, they will buy a Samari, they will buy an Ndidi, and it works out a lot of the time because the scouting's good. But United don't really go for that sort of player, do they? I don't think United would go for a Basuma. I don't think we were linked with Samari, we never did it. I don't think we'd go for a Barella because it's like, oh, what if it doesn't work? We tend to want to go for more nailed on things, if you know what I mean. Also from Marmaduke, he says, Mark, or she says, could be a she, Mark, say it was Madrid or PSG going for Ronaldo rather than City. Do you think United would still have made the move? I'm so happy we did, though. I don't know. I don't know. Tchouaméni, I'd still take Tchouaméni, but that's not going to happen. I don't know. I think United had to go for Ronaldo when he was thinking about going to Man City. Would we have gone for Ronaldo if PSG had been in for him? Would we have won the race if PSG had been in for him? I don't know. But the reality is we've got Ronaldo, so hypotheticals are not that important. David says, I'm fuming over Van der Beek. Man United's supposed to nurture talent, not destroy it. Even Kleberson got opportunity. Imagine if Van der Beek went and Lingard stays. Do you like Awar? Says Jamie. I do. He's not coming to United, though. He's not going to come to Manchester United. And stop playing 4-2-3-1. It's boring to watch, says Robert. And what do you think of Rain Sangar at PSV for CDM, says Adam Partridge. And Bruno should know Palina and how good he is, says Evan Scannell. And speaking for the Korean fans, since the Park era, it's a shame that Kim Jae is constantly overlooked. Have you had a chance to look into him, Mark, says Brian? Nope. And excited for Ronaldo return, but Ollie will let us down. And yeah, there's huge positives to having Cristiano Ronaldo at Manchester United. He'll be an influence in the dressing room. He'll be a strong voice in the dressing room. But he's going to be a very big influence in that dressing room when he's getting no service. And I think the away record is very good. Coming second in the league is very good. 7 points from 9 is not terrible. But you scratch the surface of all of that and the football's not been the level that you would expect. And more importantly, through all that, we don't create hardly any chances for our striker. The only time we were creating anywhere near enough chances for our striker was when Pogba went left wing with Bruno at 10 and Cavani up front towards the end of last season. And the reason that worked is because Pogba is creative. We could be a hell of a lot more creative if we had a decent midfielder. But Ronaldo's not going to put up with playing at United and living off scraps. He wants chances and he expects chances. And I wonder how much notice Cristiano's been taking of Manchester United over the last 2 years. I doubt he's been watching as many games as we have, and I doubt he's been scrutinising it in the way we do. He's in for a wide-eyed wake-up call when he comes to United if we continue to play like we have done at the start of this season and how we did last season, where we don't create enough chances. We don't put enough good quality balls into the box, and we certainly don't stretch teams enough. Ronaldo needs that to happen, and I think Ollie's got 2 weeks to figure out how he's going to do it. Mark, would you take Witsel for 5 million? Says Fairfree. I do like Witsel, but I don't think he's the solution, is he? And Shuddy says, surely the Glazers know we are one signing from getting them some leeway. 25 million is change for them, and then it would be all on Ollie, says Shuddy. But it's money, isn't it? It's always the money. It's always the money that causes the problem at Manchester United. So, yeah, I don't know. Please subscribe, by the way, bottom right-hand corner. You're very welcome. Do you think Sancho would play better with Donny in the creative role, says Pravisha? I think Sancho would play better if we moved the ball quicker and, got the ball to his feet. Cavani gets 21 and Ronaldo gets 7. It only makes sense. Hopefully they unveil him soon and they do it properly, says Damon. And I think we would win the league with Son. Thoughts on this, says Brian? Well, we've just bought Ronaldo. Sonaldo's just the Poundland version, so surely we're going to win the league. Mark, I don't understand. Will the United game not be shown here in the America? Yeah, it will. It's just in England. It's not on the telly. What's your thought on playing Pogba on the left, then having Van der Beek, Fred as a double pivot? Stephen, I wouldn't mind trying it, but Ollie won't try it. And do you think Ronaldo is good enough to create his own chances, or is he slightly past it for that? But you can't create his own chances, Brian. This is the problem. It's not even like, if you get Green with the ball, he can create his own chances. He did that twice yesterday, but we don't get the ball up the pitch high enough, quick enough. It's not about, a player shouldn't have to create their own chances, but we don't even get the ball for them to do that. So, we've got to move the ball quicker and we've got to have more of the ball in the final third. That's what we need to do at United. So anyway, look, spoken enough. Dan James should be done soon enough, and we move into the last few hours of the transfer window tomorrow. We will be back at 8 o'clock, and it sounds like we might be back with a Cristiano Ronaldo official announcement as well. To be great players, Lingard and Martial need consecutive games and at Manchester United, and it's not going to happen. We've got to move them on, says Damien Gilbert. Okay. 8 o'clock show. Adam, Levin, me, Kev, will be on for that. Make sure you subscribe, bottom right hand corner, and click the bell, because the next video could well be Ronaldo official. Hopefully it will be. It's meant to be happening in the next few hours. And I'll speak to you all in a little bit. Thanks for watching. Speak to you all in a bit.